with that, let me introduce Jennifer Mahaffey, who is your board president and Taylor Morrison representative. Then we have Steve Bay, who is your OG board member that is a homeowner within the community. And we have our most recent addition, Stan, who is also joining us on this call. We have a couple people that are trickling in the background, so we'll give them a few minutes to kind of pop onto this call. But really, this is an opportunity for you as homeowners to ask questions directly about the board position. Please note, we will not be discussing any sort of board-related topics that would require more community members present. So please keep your questions specific to the position of being on the board. So with that, does anyone want to jump in? I see Doug here, I see Jan, and I see Pete is here, or maybe that's Paula, but it's nice to have you all join us. Don't everyone jump at once.
You can put it in chat too if you're
You guys, yeah, if
comfortable.
you guys are more comfortable with that, you can always drop it in the chat. I can read the question out loud, and then that way the board members can respond accordingly.
I would ask if you're comfortable, if you turn on your cameras, that'd be great. All right, if nobody has any questions, we get the thing started off here. For Pete, Jan, and Doug, did you receive the HOA board member position description? Oh my gosh, around January, back when Stan was running for election, the one that people have a lot of trouble with because it says 20 hours a week was my estimation. That one? You guys remember seeing that one?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you don't have any questions to start off with, I'll ask one more time. If you have questions to start off with, I will try to explain the 20 hours a week, but go ahead if you have questions. All right. So the 20 hours a week, we're not talking about 20 hours a week directly involved with a meeting or something like that. But if I have a meeting, right, like this one, I'm going to spend, and I did, this one specifically, 60 to 90 minutes before the meeting earlier in the week, preparing for it, having things to discuss, right? And when this one ends, I probably won't have anything to do for follow-up on this meeting, but I might. But oftentimes, I schedule 30 minutes after a meeting for follow-up, sometimes an hour for follow-up. I might have been tasked by the board president or another board member, or I might have volunteered from the general manager that I would take that task on, because there's really only 2 or 3 of us up until Stan came along to do all the work. Now, it might be less than 20 hours a week, depending on how you like to spend your time. If you become a board member, you may not want to be as hands-on, or you may not feel that you need to be as hands-on as I have. Stan's going to follow me with his opinions of the 20 hours a week, and he's still learning. But I think he'd say right now, learning the job is at least 20 hours a week. But it's not 20 hours a week of meetings. What I say is, it's when I got up this morning, I probably spent an hour at 18 HOA emails this morning when I logged on. And for me, they might be easy ones that I can just glance at this point and I go, oh yeah, that's an ACC I already know about. That's a follow-up in the threaded discussion, and it's being supported. We're going to approve that ACC. I don't need to look at it again. I just need to wait the 7 days for homeowners to have neighbors to have their ability to acknowledge it. But as a board member, you're probably going to want to take a look at the invoices that come in every week. And on average, there's 20 to 25 invoices that come in per week. 18 of these can be just for power bills, and you're probably going to look at those and see, are we paying them on time? How much are they? How much does that relate to this time last year? Oh, it's more. Well, does that make sense based upon the percentage of homes more that we have this year than last year? So you're going to be able to spend time looking at details like that. If you want to pass that off to somebody else on the board or lean on the general manager more, that's going to be your prerogative, right? But when there's not that many of us on the board, it does take a lot more time. What am I missing here? Ongoing education, training. You are looking at all the architectural control applications. You are holding office hours at least once a month if you like to. You don't have to, right? I think it's a great idea. I did that early on as an example that I would like to see other board members after me that represent me. I'd like to have them hold public office hours so that people have a chance to come and talk to them in person. You're going to go over different communications that have happened. You're required to, or you're asked to review the communications that happen between the general manager and any interactions and any communications they had with any homeowner for the month. We get a monthly report at the end of the month that goes over, okay, what did this homeowner ask for? What did this homeowner comment on? What was Nova's response or the general manager's response or the board's response to their communication? It could be as simple as my tree is dead and I'd like this tree replaced, or it could be something like temperature in the pool or wanting a park bench or anything. And you're going to want to keep an eye on how is the general manager replying to people? Is Nova, as our management company, replying to them adequately and in a timely manner? And you have oversight on all of those things that you have to get your hands around as a board member. Occasionally, you'll have staffing issues. You might have to hire somebody. You might have to fire somebody. You might have to somewhat, as a member of the board, as a component of the board, direct or discipline. You will have to stand in interviews for, it could be standing up a new committee, like the Budget Advisory Committee. We interview each of those individuals that come onto that committee because it's a very important committee. Any new staff members that you're going to bring on or replace, you're going to go through and you're going to be spending hours interviewing people, right, for those jobs. So I hope that gives you an idea of some of the things, and I didn't go over everything, appeals decisions and other things that you might have to do. And then there's always putting out fires, just weird little things you never would have thought popped up. Somebody asked me the other day for an example, a specific example of what a board member does. So I'll give you this hypothetical. Hasn't happened yet, probably will, but it certainly applies to any little weird thing that you never thought you'd see that you have to make a decision on. So let's say a homeowner wants to replace their roof. Well, great. We've thought about that long ago. And we've made standardizations as to what you can put on your roof. Has to be asphalt. It's on the portal in the standardizations. Has to be black or dark brown or something like that in nature. I can go back and look at it on and on. But this homeowner, this hypothetical homeowner, they want to re-roof their house in solar shingles. Shingles that are, each shingle is actually a solar panel. Tesla makes them. Doug is nodding his head. He's aware they exist. Well, look, in this hypothetical situation, these solar shingles are not aesthetically compliant with the rest of the community. If somebody puts them on, it'll look different than every other house. So maybe you want to say, no, can't do it. But the RCW, the Revised Code of Washington, says, as an HOA, you have to let somebody put solar panels on their roof. Does it say solar shingles? No, but does it cover it? Well, maybe. Yeah, so you're stuck in that. And then, let's say you agree with it. Okay, so it's not going to look aesthetically the same. It's going to go against our current policy, but you're going to fight for it. But you might have a committee that's fighting against it, or another board member that's fighting against it, saying, no, it doesn't meet the standard. And this is going to eat, it's just one person's request to do one thing will eat up a lot of your time. You're going to have to think intelligently about it. You're going to have to think about whether or not your decision can legally be supported, whether it's, a denial that you're going to have to justify later on, or an approval that you have now set a precedent for everybody else is now allowed to follow it because you let one person do it. Your decisions as a board member, especially early on, especially for me early on when there were only 200 homes, so much of it was about precedence that you really had to spend a lot of time and really wring your hands over it and make sure you're doing the right thing for the greatest number of people going forward, not just what at the time in the present that you're making the decision. That's not enough to think about. It's going forward. Okay, Stan, 20 hours a week. What do you think, buddy?
Well, first of all, I would say I think Steve's done an excellent job giving you a rough outline of what the job entails and the number of hours. I have to say that when I came on 3 months ago, I was curious as to how close 20 hours was to the actual time that I would need to spend in my position on the board. And I have to say, I think it's probably a little bit of an understatement. I will say there's weeks where, and I don't track my hours daily or anything like that, but I know Steve doesn't either, but there's weeks where it might be 16 hours. And there's weeks where, like right before our quarterly board meeting, when we're meeting with 6 or 7 committees and committee meetings, and then the board meeting and getting prepared for that and everything, it could be 35 hours in a week. I mean, when you have that many meetings in a week. So it varies, but I think 20 would probably be a good estimate. The only thing I would add to what Steve said, and he touched on it, and that is that if you look at the fact that we have over 400 homes in this community right now, and somewhere down the road to be 800, there's nothing that happens in this community, nothing that happens with financial statements, with invoices, with ACC applications, issues, problems, you name it. There's nothing that happens that the board doesn't touch in some way, shape, or form. And so, you need to be aware of the fact that no matter what it is, you're going to get CC'd on it. You're going to be expected to read it and have an idea of what's going on and give your opinion. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes on in this neighborhood, in this community, on a daily, if not weekly basis. So I would say expect at least 20 hours a week if you're doing the job justice. And if you're spending less time than that, you're probably not doing it justice. Jennifer?
So I'd like to open it up for questions again and let the board president speak as well. And then maybe Stan and I can discuss what it means to be on a declarant board as a homeowner board member. But let's ask questions first and let Jennifer have her say too.
Wait and see if there's a question.
You know what? Why don't we go a different avenue for a hot second? Doug, why don't you take an opportunity to tell us what brought you to this meeting today? And then we'll go down to Jan and Pete and see if maybe we can draw up some conversation to see if questions might come up from the homeowners. And then we can tackle any questions that might come up along the way. Does that seem like a less cricket way of managing this a little bit?
Sure, I can do that.
Perfect. Hi, Doug.
Hey. Basically, I came because I wanted to find out more about what the position was. This is the kind of thing I've done a lot of in the past, but it's always been technical, not keeping track of what plants are planted where. So having no agricultural background whatsoever, I was a little concerned I might not be a good fit, so I wanted to hear more about what was actually done. Sounds like a lot of budgeting, a lot of planning. I greatly appreciated Steve talking about looking ahead for precedent and thinking about what your decisions might mean in 10 years.
Can I piggyback on what Doug has to say? Because I think it might help is kind of what I was going to say earlier. I mean, to Stan and Steve's point, it's hard to say how many hours, but yeah, it will ebb and flow. Budget ratification season, you're hot and heavy. You do have some low moments. We're kind of in a heavier cycle right now. We have a lot of very pressing tasks. We've had a lot of community engagement with a lot of requests. And to Steve's point, and Doug, to your point, you don't actually have to have prior board experience. Nova actually also helps with a lot of the tasks that Steve and Stan have outlined. We do have resources and tools. You do have access on the back side of the portal that it's easy to see all the ACC requests. There's a whole process and a mechanism. It is easy to review invoices. There's also a whole message that attaches to messaging system that attaches. So you do have support in that. It's not just like everything, but you got to learn the back system a little bit. So there is a learning curve with that. But we do have a lot of resources provided by our management company to help us as board members, make our jobs a little bit easier. I will say, I just think things flux. And to your point about you don't need to be an agriculturist or horticulturist. I mean, we do have a lot of very established committees, like the ACC committee and the landscaping committee are highly involved. They may not make their name might not rubber stamp the final decision, but I will tell you that our landscape committee specifically they've been managing essentially that landscape contract in terms of working with the vendors, getting it dialed in so it meets our specific community needs, making sure things get adjusted and changed. And a lot of the times the board, we're like, yeah, great, this is awesome. You guys have done a great job. Same with the BAC, having them be a part of our community budgeting. I touch it the least. I see it probably towards the very end. And same with the board, but your homeowners create your budget. You have a lot of, to this point where Steve's going to talk about what it feels like and what it's like to be on a declarant board. I just want to reiterate that you do have a lot of homeowner involvement. It just looks different. So you will touch a lot of things and you won't have to be an expert at a lot of things, but you do see things and you do get a lot of random emails that just come through. So you're in the loop because you do need to be in the loop. We have a very active community. And so it is really helpful as part of your decision making is you just need to be informed. And so you will see like maybe 18 emails. A lot of those are just ACC stipulations being put in because the way the portal works, we all get notifications. So we're staying on track. So a lot of it's kind of like minutia emails like that, but we do get some other ones that do require some decision making and attention. Sometimes we have to have extra calls here and there to discuss things in real time. Because let's be honest, in our community, time is not our friend. Waiting on something isn't always the most advantageous thing. So sometimes we have to respond to things quicker rather than waiting. We do have scheduled board check-ins where the board meets with Takara and, through with her Nova experience. And just so you know, Takara does not make decisions. She executes and works on behalf of the board who makes decisions. So I think everyone thinks the manager, Takara, is just making rogue decisions. She's basically going off of guardrails and guidelines and expectations set by the board. And I do think that's important to know because I think a lot of people in homeowners associations don't necessarily know that. And that's how we as in Taylor Morrison, I've been in this position 12 years now. That's kind of how we've always done our standard. So yeah, you don't have to be an expert at everything. I think Steve learned a lot along his way. I learned something new along the way. And sometimes it is a learning curve. And we are very focused on precedence. And I think we're going to kind of be dialing that back in a little bit because I know a lot of people like to live in the now and we want in the now. But we have to think about my job is to make sure you guys are set up successfully and making sure that you as homeowner run board members can have a viable association. So that might feel a little bit different, and maybe not as preferred by some, but we do constantly think of that. And that is a high focus for us. So we'll probably just, Dan, do you want to add something? And then we should probably hit Janet or Pete.
I just want to add that, Jennifer just mentioned the learning curve, and as of the newest board member, I can tell you there is a learning curve, and I'm still learning today, even after 3 months. But and I'm nowhere near the level of knowledge that Steve has after 4 years. However, the committees that we have, it's their job to understand the standardizations that we have in the community for each committee, and they really make a new board member's job a lot easier than you think it sounds like it could be, because it can be overwhelming with all the standardizations and all the different committees and all the different pieces that go into this. But when you can rely on some of the committee chairs that we have and the job that they do a fantastic job, and usually have done their homework and they know what they're talking about. So and as you grow as a board member and get to the point where Steve is, where I aspire to be at one day here down the road, He knows the standardizations like the back of his hand too. So, and I hope that one day I get there. But in the meantime, having those committees kind of at my doing as a support role really make a big difference. So,
Great point. All right. Jan or Pete? Oh, it looks like Pete's unmuted, so.
Yeah, I want to just say thank you, Steve, for your service and for being a great neighbor too. I'm sorry my camera doesn't work, but I'll send you a picture. Or I'll see you at the next 36 court outing, whichever comes first. I was just curious mainly about, and I'm not so much up for serving for a while. I haven't been retired that long. I don't want to think about work. But I am curious about the operation of the two boards, the declarant versus the fully homeowner board. So that's really my curiosity for being here.
Do you have a specific question in that regard?
Not really, no. I'm just wondering how how the operation would work once I guess the Taylor Morrison's out of the picture and so forth.
Sure. Well, going back in the history of it, so up until 200 houses were built, it was all Taylor Morrison employees and representatives on the board. And then a lot of people know this, but it's good repeating because we have a lot of new homeowners. At one quarter build out, one homeowner was scheduled to be on the board. And so 3 of us ran, I won, and I've been doing it. Stan came on at the halfway point. It was always explained to us that at 50%, we would have 2 homeowners on the board. And, and Taylor Morrison would still have the equivalent of, let's say, 3 votes. So it's 3-2. And I don't want that to sound like us against them because it's not. And I'll get into that in a minute. At 75% build out, what you have is anybody who's a homeowner on the board and Taylor Morrison on the board leaves the board, and we get a full slate election for 5 homeowners on the board at 75%. How long will it take to get there? Probably 3.5 years, give or take 6 months is how long it'll take to get us another 200 homes built. So that's when we get 5 homeowners on the board. Now, if you get into the details of your governing documents and your declaration, et cetera, do those 5 homeowners have control of every possible decision on the board? No. Taylor Morrison still holds the equivalent of a veto ability for any decision made by the board. Do they have a history of doing that? No. Unless, in my opinion, unless it was some extreme example of a decision by the 5 homeowner board, such as we'd like to sell the pavilion and demolish it in order to save money so we don't have to raise dues to fix the roof and continue to pay the utilities. That would be an example of I would expect Taylor Morrison to come in and veto it and say, no, you are not going to demolish that. When would our board have the ability to take such an extreme action without the declarant's input? That's at 100% build out. That's when the homeowner board has absolute oversight without any veto ability by the declarant. Okay. So does that help you there for at least, what it is?
Yes.
When it happens?
Yeah.
Okay. And then before Jennifer goes on, I would just like to say now, it hasn't been an us versus them relationship with the homeowner board member and the declarant board members. They've been very good about listening to me and listening to whatever concerns I bring to them that I hear about and receive from my fellow homeowners. Do I occasionally lose the vote or get overruled? Yes, I can probably count that number of times on one hand. Do we find a compromise for the best way to go forward so that the person that brought the idea gets something of what they want? Yes, very often. And it's amazing how often that the answer from Taylor Morrison is, well, what way does the community want to go? You guys get to choose the way you want your community to go. And that policy is then put in place, and then we will enforce that policy. And that could be the equivalent of how much does this community want to see people personalize their front porches or their front lawns? Where does that personalization end? At the porch, at the lawn, at the sidewalk, that kind of stuff. find the policy, go forward with it, and then be consistent about it. All right, Jennifer?
Yeah, I was just going to elaborate on just a couple of things that you said. So your governing, you said it, the governing documents speak to the percentage, 25%, 50%, and then 75% closed is the definition of transition. It's closed, not sold, closed. And what Steve's referring to is even at transition at 75% closed, yes, it's a full homeowner run board, but there are still lingering declarant rights until we close the last unit, just to clarify that a little bit more specifically. So he was right, but give you a little bit more teeth into that concept. Yes, there are two other Taylor Morrison declarant board members. They are pretty much silent members. They don't even touch anything I do to any degree. They basically give me the ability to represent the majority. They're not involved in, excuse me, I know that we get asked that at board meetings and sometimes it gets really pointed and it's like they're not like sitting back there making decisions. It's pretty much me, myself, and I since day one. They may sign a budget or something that I need to get, have someone represent that when I first establish a community, but pretty much thereafter they're not really involved. So unless there's a weird extenuating circumstance, but they're pretty much silent people, because I
So
know that
Pete,
comes up
I
a
want to
lot. Go ahead.
I want to give you a concrete example of
Yeah.
where I disagreed with the board
Okay.
and was overruled, and where the compromise came in. So an example would be not too long ago, Taylor Morrison wanted to use the villages for a corporate event. And I said, now, wait a second, you're going to close down this entire facility for the day of the event and a half day beforehand for prep and maybe a half day after for cleanup, where we don't have access to our villages. And they said, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And I said, and you have that right as the declarant, don't you? There's nothing I can say about this. And they're like, yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's have the vote anyway. So we held an executive session. The other two Taylor Morrison employees that we never see, that Jennifer holds the proxy for as the voter, they came on. They allowed me to record my vote as no and give my reasons, and they then voted all yes for Taylor Morrison. So there's an example of they listened to me, they listened to my concerns. I lost the vote, but where did we compromise? Taylor Morrison did not have to compensate us monetarily for the use of it, but we got a compromise, and they paid us the equivalent of what an equivalent square footage banquet hall in the local area would cost for that number of hours. So we got some compensation for it. So at least there's some back and forth, there's some compromise. And I can tell you that while people also complain about Taylor Morrison sometimes overruling decisions that a homeowner board might make, we do have to remember that it's Taylor Morrison's vision, it's their investment. They have investors behind them. They have to see their plan carried out the way it was presented to their investors. So they have to see their build out carried out the way it was given to their investors. But along the way, Taylor Morrison has continued to give us, on average, about $20,000 a year in services and products, whether it be improvements to our irrigation system or appliances or things to reimburse us for certain events that we've had. Taylor Morrison continues to provide money to the HOA long after they have been required to do so.
Go ahead, Stan, and then we'll get to Jan.
Yeah, I just want to also put in my 2 cents worth on the declarant board. I think in the last 3 months that I've been around, there's only just been a couple times where Taylor Morrison has had some influence on a decision that was made on the board. But the one thing I appreciate about this board and about Taylor Morrison, and especially about Jennifer Mahaffey, is that they will listen, and they will listen to what Steve and I have to say. They will hear all what we have to say and listen to all the facts before they make a decision. And more importantly, at least for me, it's important that if Taylor Morrison is going to say no, they say, why no? And I think why no is a real important piece that Steve and I understand why they're making the decision they're making. And as Steve said, they've got a huge investment here and they've got certain things that they want to see in the neighborhood. And I understand that, and that's their prerogative. But for the most part, I would say the vast majority of the decisions that are made on this board are made in a collaborative fashion. And it's made throughout discussions that take place between Steve and Jennifer and myself. And then we come to a decision that we think is going to be in the best interest of the community. And I feel like I always have a say on this board, and always will, as long as the current administration is in place, because they listen to what we have to say. So for anybody out there, and I saw a lot of comments on the survey that people believe that we don't have a say and it's just a rubber stamp by Taylor Morrison, that couldn't be further from the truth, as far as I'm concerned. We definitely have a say.
I'll give you one more that's the reverse of that, and everybody's familiar with the fact that we used to do mulching and barking every year in every division. So I think I want to take the responsibility, for better or worse, for brainstorming that little brainchild that, hey, we can see in the future this is not going to be affordable to continue doing. We have to reduce the service without removing the service completely. Taylor Morrison would have preferred that we provided that service as an HOA every year. It's certainly better for sales. It certainly sounds better for prospective buyers. But I pushed and had the landscape committee come up with a plan, and that we would do this every other year so that we could reduce runaway costs that I could see coming in years to come. So that would be an example of a decision that I spearheaded that Taylor Morrison went along with that was not to their benefit.
Jan, did you want to share anything? We haven't heard from you yet. The card, can you unmute her?
I think she might be muted.
Yeah, I think there she is.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. I had a couple of questions. Thank you, Steve. You answered many of the questions I had. I didn't realize that this meeting was people who are thinking about being on the board, because it's not something that I'm really thinking about doing. But I was more interested in the transition.
Oh, come on. I need a strong person to stand up and replace me. I'm running out of steam. I got 5 weeks left. Come on.
I was interested in the transition, but I do have a couple of questions. And how many, so you mentioned, Jennifer, the two somewhat silent board members. So is there a total of 5 board members?
Currently, yes, your board consists of 5 board members.
Okay. And when we are 100% built out, will that continue to be 5, or is that up to the HOA to decide if we want to increase that to 7? Or, I mean, I'm unfamiliar with that.
Currently, your governing documents say 5.
Okay.
If you as an association wanted to make changes, there's probably a process that you'll need to do, because it does impact your governing documents.
Okay.
And you have layers of your governing documents. Some are recorded, so that, amendments, changes, I'll also go through a voting process. And a percentage of ownership needs to vote on those, and the percentage of ownership that needs to vote depends on what you're changing. So, yeah, and so that would be something. If you could also have that, hence the committees, you can have branches, like it's, you have your main board, and then you can have extensions and extensions of your board. So, I mean, I hate to use the cliche, but I will. It takes a village to run a village. And I think there's a lot of people, and I don't mean the clubhouse, but I do think there's a lot of people see the time constraint and they think it's a lot. I mean, you are a very active community, and there is a lot. And I think what takes a lot of time right now is that we still are evolving, and we still have a lot of homeowners, and we're still growing. So it's hard to kind of really pin things down completely. And so we're constantly changing and evolving and trying to find that solution. So at transition, yes, 5 board members. And then if you want to have like subcommittees or sub factions of that, and typically you have an odd number because you need to have a majority when you vote.
Okay, I had 2 other questions. One of them was on like a continuing education. Do you offer for new board members classes that they can go to?
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
the best two ways to do that. One, you'll do an online certification through the Community Association Institute, where you'll get your board member training. And then there are lots of continuing education opportunities that are provided for you if you'd like to do those voluntarily through that same program. My preference is to attend quarterly meetings with the City of Lacey HOA networking conference. And they're about 2 to 3 hours a night, once a quarter, and you meet with other HOA board members. And there's usually a presenter that gives a topic there, and there's a member of the City of Lacey that is in charge of organizing these things. They're called, her name's Jenny Bowersfield. And you'll get topics from anything from insurance to incentives the City of Lacey might provide you as an HOA for upgrading certain irrigation or electrical things within your HOA, management, changes in the law that are coming down the pike and legislation that are going to affect you as a board member in the HOA. Right now, the pendulum has swung very much to the power of the board members on the HOA versus the owners. The pendulum legislatively is already switching back to the owners and make it much more difficult for the board to do things on their own. And so we get all that information that way. So yes, continuing education is provided.
And my last question has to do with something that you said, Steve, about making a decision and making sure that it complies with RCWs. I'm assuming that there is an attorney on, for Taylor Morrison to make sure that anything that we do complies.
So that's interesting the way that you said that there's an attorney for Taylor Morrison.
Yeah.
There's not a Taylor Morrison attorney for our HOA. There's an HOA attorney for our HOA, right?
Okay.
Where did we get it from? Well, it was already being used by Taylor Morrison's other HOAs. One of the great benefits that you have by being under the declarant is when you need a resource, Taylor Morrison and Jennifer Mahaffey has an electronic Rolodex of, yes, we've got that resource. Let's go to that person, right? They don't work for Taylor Morrison, but we've used them in the past for other HOAs. Would you like to do that? So it takes a lot of the legwork out of the way for us, being on the declarant. When we need resources like that, it's going to be much more painful when Taylor Morrison's not here. If we don't have some of those things set up, what attorney do we want to use? What management company do we want to use? God forbid, what insurance company do we want to use? That's a whole other story. So yes, we have had Stan's over here laughing. Yes, we've had to use legal counsel. The HOA's legal counsel, not Taylor Morrison's. They have a separate office of legal counsel, which we will have to run some things by them sometimes. It hasn't happened very often if Taylor Morrison has a say in it. How many times have we had to use legal counsel? So I would say we use them 3 to 4 times a year we have a question that we just don't feel comfortable asking or making a decision on until we ask this question of a lawyer. We'll use them 3 to 4 times a year for that. And on average, once a year, maybe, please take action against a homeowner on behalf of the association. Maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 years, we've had to do that. Usually that's long day. Usually that's a case where a homeowner is specifically being belligerent or misbehaving toward neighbors or toward staff or flagrantly violating the written rules and regulations. Then we will have to have action. In all these cases, does it cost us money as an association? It's a lawyer. Of course it does. It costs us money. And that's always in our minds too.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, well, does anybody have anything else Doug or Pete, did that prompt any additional questions that you would like to be addressed? Or if not, Stan or Steve, do you have anything that you wish you had mentioned that you haven't had the opportunity to yet?
Oh, I'm good, Takara. Thank you.
Doug, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Do you have any additional questions that we need to address?
I'd love to have, can we ask questions after the fact? Because I'm probably going to think about this for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, you are more than welcome to either submit those through the portal or you can direct them to me and I can forward them onto the board for response. Again, more than welcome to facilitate that communication between the parties, should you think of anything that was not mentioned on this call.
Great, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Doug, there's one more way. If you
Oh.
just want to come and sit down with one of us, you can do it by appointment, that's fine. But, Stan has office hours on the 29th from 5 to 7 p.m. Again, on the 5th from 5 to 7 p.m. And then I'm holding my last ones on the 12th from 1 to 4 p.m. If you just want to come down and lay out those questions and bring them in a written form, whatever you want to do, let's just sit and have a cup of coffee and talk.
And Doug, if you didn't catch those written very quickly, they are on the portal calendar and that is at the pavilion, not the villages. Okay, well, Stan, do you have anything that you would like to add that you haven't had an opportunity to cover yet?
No, that was it. I think I just wanted to review the office hours to make sure that they were fully aware that they could come down and talk about any of this at the office hours, and we'll be there to answer your questions.
Steve, any hot gossip you want to share with the group?
For the three of you present, if you yourself are not willing to run for a board position now, you might be in the future. If you know of somebody that you respect, you see that they have the time, they might have the passion, please, bend their arm for us a little bit. We could use, a good, strong 2 or 3 candidates for any time there's a position that comes open. So please get out there and hit the streets, the phone call if you know somebody. Tell them, Steve's 20 hours thing, that's how he does the job. If you want to do the job differently, of course you can do the job differently and you can spend a different amount of time doing it. So I realize the 20 hours scared a lot of people off. Okay, that's me. All right, guys.
Last but not least, Jennifer, do you have anything that we did not cover that you would like to have mentioned before we thank everyone for their time?
Not really. I do appreciate Steve saying, let people know, maybe encourage them to watch this call if they're interested. We do need strong candidates and we'd like to kind of change that tide a little bit and have people not be like, I don't know, scared for the lack of good word to be involved.
All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for taking the time. We did record this call, so we'll be sending it out to the community once it's posted up to the YouTube channel. Again, Doug, Jan, and Pete, if you think of any questions or comments that you after the fact wished you had mentioned or relayed or asked, you are more than welcome to reach out to me or Felicia, and we can help facilitate getting an answer for you, or pop down to Stan and Steve's office hours, and I'm sure that they'll be able to have that live in-person conversation with you.
Yep.
Amazing.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank you
great
very much.
rest of your day.
Appreciate your time.
Yes.
Bye-bye.